Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So if you've been on this journey through music theory with us, we spent months, really, in a pretty comfortable place.
World of tonality.
Exactly. That gravitational pull of the tonic, the stability of major and minor keys, that, predictable pleasure when a V7 chord resolves to the eye.
The world that basically ran from Bach all the way through Brahms.
And today, we're going to watch it all burn.
That's a good way to put it. The shift from the late 19th into the 20th century is, well, it's probably the most radical break in Western music history. Composers weren't just tweaking the rules.
No, they were consciously rejecting them.
Fundamentally, they took that anchor we all rely on, the tonic, and just threw it overboard.
Which is thrilling, but it can also be really overwhelming, demands a whole new vocabulary. So our mission today is very focused.
Laser focused.
We are going to master the definitions, the precise definitions of the radical tools composers started using when they deliberately avoided that major-minor world. We're talking advanced chords, multiple keys at once, and totally new systems for making music hang together.
It's an intellectual battlefield.
It really is. Yeah. So let's dive in.
Okay. So the first and maybe most severe shot fired in this whole revolution was the concept of atonality.
Right. We hear that term thrown around a lot, but for anyone who really wants to master this, we need the clinical definition. What does it actually mean?
Atonality, simply put, is music written with no specific key, no tonality, and no mode being used.
So it's the abolition of a home base.
It's the intentional abolition of hierarchy. In tonal music, certain notes, like the tonic and dominant, are more important, right? Atonality demands total sonic democracy. All 12 notes are equal.
And that decision has massive consequences. If you're consciously avoiding a tonic, you have to avoid the chords that point to it, which means you start using notes that, well, traditionally would sound wrong.
You have to. The whole point of functional harmony is creating tension and release around a central pitch. If you get rid of that pitch, every chord you build has to contain these non-tonal, unresolved notes. It creates a very dense, often dissonant texture.
And this wasn't about creating chaos, was it?
Not at all. For someone like Arnold Schoenberg, it was about finding a new way to organize dissonance, to give it structure.
Okay, so a logical next step from refusing to commit to one key would be to commit to several at once.
Exactly. And that brings us right to polytonality.
Layering.
It's a strategy of layering. The definition you need to know is the combination of several different keys at the same time. It's a very specific, very 20th century sound.
Its most common form is bitonality, right?
Correct. Bitonality is just a specific type of polytonality. It's the use of two different keys at the same time. So you might have the woodwinds playing a clear melody in, say, F major, while the brass is playing one in C sharp major.
At the same time.
At the very same time.
But, how does that not just sound like a mess? Just two random things happening at once.
That's the art of it. Composers who did this well, like Stravinsky or Milhaud, they would often simplify other things, maybe a really driving, clear rhythm, or they'd keep the harmonies within each key very simple.
I think our source material had a great visual for this.
It did. It showed a score with 4 different key signatures all playing at once. D major, B flat major, G major, and E major.
Wow.
And that kind of intentional clash creates a new kind of tension. It's structural. It's like listening to 4 conversations at once, but somehow they're all about the same thing.
Okay, that makes sense. So the old system of music, what we call tertian harmony, was all about building chords in thirds, C, E, G. Very resolved, very sweet. If composers wanted to avoid that sound, what did they use instead?
They needed a new building block, and they found it in the interval of a fourth. This gives us chordal harmony.
So instead of stacking thirds, C, E, G, you'd stack fourths, like C, F, B flat.
Precisely. Chordal harmony is a harmonic system based on the interval of a fourth, and the sound is completely different.
How so?
Well, tertian harmony feels warm, functional, it's always pulling you somewhere. Chordal harmony sounds open, spacious, sometimes really stark and architectural. It doesn't have that same sense of forward motion because fourths don't imply resolution in the same way.
Before we go fully off the deep end into these new systems, let's back up just a bit. Because before this radical break, composers were pushing the old system, functional tonality, to its absolute breaking point.
They really were.
And that brings us to one of the most intellectually satisfying chords in all of music theory, the augmented sixth chord.
Ah, yes. This chord is fascinating. It's like a warning sign that the system is about to collapse.
Yeah.
The key thing to master here is that it's an altered chord. specifically defined as not being within the tonality of the piece.
But it functions in relation to that tonality
Mm.
very powerfully.
So powerfully. It gets its name from that incredibly unstable directional interval, an augmented sixth between its lowest and highest notes. That interval just screams for resolution.
And it's built on a very specific note.
Yes, on the flatted sixth degree of the scale, the flatted submedian, and its job is almost always to resolve directly to the dominant chord. It's like winding a rubber band as tight as it can possibly go right before you let it snap back.
And for anyone studying this, you really need to know the three classic flavors of this chord. They're all a bit different.
Right. First, you have the Italian augmented sixth. That's the simplest version, just 3 notes,
Then there's the French augmented sixth.
which adds a fourth note, an augmented fourth, giving it this really distinct, almost hollow sound.
And finally, the German.
The German augmented sixth, it also adds a fourth note, but this time it's a perfect fifth. It's the densest, richest sounding of the 3.
The key takeaway here isn't just memorizing the notes, is it? It's understanding that composers were adding these extra notes to create the most possible ambiguity and tension without completely breaking the rules.
They had stretched the rules as far as they would go, and that exhaustion is the perfect bridge to what came next. When they realized they couldn't stretch tonality any further, they jumped into a system that ignored it completely, but they needed a new structure.
Which takes us to serialism, or the 12-tone system.
Yes.
I always found this so paradoxical. Atonality feels like total freedom, but serialism seems like the ultimate cage. Why invent such a rigid mathematical system right after you've supposedly liberated yourself?
That is the absolute core paradox of serialism. Once you have total freedom atonality, you have no framework, no way to decide what note comes next. If all notes are equal, what's your organizing principle?
So serialism was the answer to that problem.
It was. It solved it by imposing a total precompositional order.
So define the technique for us. How does it work?
Serialism is a method where the composer first arranges all 12 notes of the chromatic scale into a specific ordered sequence. This sequence is called the 12-tone row.
And that row becomes the DNA for the whole piece.
The genetic material, exactly. The intervals in that specific row dictate everything that follows. And the main rule is no single note can be repeated until all the other 11 have been sounded.
Which guarantees that no note ever becomes a tonic. No note gets more importance than any other.
Precisely.
So the row isn't just a melody, it's more like a formula that gets manipulated through some very specific, almost scientific processes.
They are very systematic. The 3 primary techniques you have to know are all about exploring every possible permutation of that original row. First up is inversion.
Right. Inversion is where you flip the melody's contour upside down. So if the original row goes up by a major third, the inversion goes down by a major third,
Correct. Then you have retrograde.
which is just playing it backwards.
Simple as that. Reading the row from right to left.
And then the most complex one, retrograde inversion.
Which is exactly what it sounds like. You take the backwards version of the row, the retrograde, and then you also apply the melodic inversion to each of those intervals.
So it's backwards and upside down.
It is. And these processes ensure the music stays coherent and ordered, even while it's actively avoiding every rule of traditional harmony we've ever learned. It's a structure built on math, not acoustics.
Before that kind of mathematical strictness really took hold, there was another earlier shift that created a much more accessible kind of blurred sound.
Yes, Impressionism.
Thinking of composers like Debussy and Ravel, late 19th, early 20th century.
Impressionism is so important because it didn't just reject tonality, it just made it indistinct. The music avoids clear tonality. Instead, it relies on what you could call unclear tonalities and these flowing, non-metric rhythms.
The goal was suggestion, not statement, like a blurred photograph.
A perfect analogy. And a huge part of how they achieved that was by using non-traditional scales. Specifically, the whole tone scale and pentatonic or 5-note scales.
The whole tone scale is a real game changer here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because every note in the scale is a whole step apart, there are no half steps.
Yeah.
And if you have no half steps, you have no leading tone.
Yeah, the leading tone is that crucial note that wants to resolve up to the tonic.
It's the magnetic pull back home. Without it, the music just kind of floats. It's
Right.
perpetually suspended with no need or ability to resolve. It's just beautiful sonic ambiguity.
And that kind of blurring of expectations carries over into rhythm, too, especially as we move deeper into the 20th and 21st centuries. I'm thinking of something like Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, which famously caused a riot.
Yes. The dramatic introduction of irregular and changing meters, sometimes we just call it complex meter.
This was a complete rejection of the steady, symmetrical pulse we got used to in the classical and romantic eras.
Completely. Composers deliberately started using uncommon time signatures like 5/4 or 7/4. And even more, they'd start changing the time signature constantly, sometimes every single measure.
So you could never get comfortable. You could never predict the next strong beat.
You couldn't. And when they used an irregular meter like 5/4, it's almost never just 5 steady beats. It's subdivided irregularly.
Right. It's usually broken up into smaller groups to give it that
Yeah.
off-kilter driving energy.
Exactly. Music in 5/4 will almost always be divided into groups of 2 plus 3 or 3 plus 2. Just think of that famous jazz piece, Take 5.
Of course, that da-da-da, da-da rhythm. 2 plus 3.
That's it. That unmistakable pattern is what makes it so compelling. So composers like Stravinsky used these driving, constantly changing rhythms to create this raw, primal energy that was just a world away from romanticism.
This has been a huge conceptual leap today. I mean, we've gone from the clarity of the major-minor world all the way to, well, to a world where structures had to be invented from scratch.
It's a lot to take in.
We've covered the functional exhaustion, the augmented sixth chord, the hazy ambiguity of chordal harmony and impressionism, the sonic layering of polytonality, and the cold, hard math of serialism.
And if you take one thing away from our deep dive today, let it be this. These techniques are what define the transition into contemporary music. When composers abandoned the old rules, they didn't just embrace anarchy.
No, they immediately looked for new systems.
New, often highly specific, intellectual or mathematical systems to create cohesion. The rebellion wasn't against order itself, it was just against the old order.
Which leaves a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. If traditional melody is built on scales that have a tonic center, a strong home base, how does a composer create something that's coherent, something memorable, when they're actively trying to use all 12 notes equally?
And at the same time, trying to avoid any specific key.
How do you write a recognizable piece of music when you've outlawed gravity?
It's the ultimate structural challenge, and it's one that composers are still grappling with today.
That's all for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.